Imagine driving through a cold autumn storm, your child asleep in the back seat, when you spot a woman standing alone beside a broken-down tractor in the middle of nowhere. Would you stop? This story doesn't begin with love. It begins with a wrench. A rain-soaked promise and a decision that changes everything. If you believe that family can be found, not just born, then like this video and subscribe to the channel for more slow, soulful stories that stay with you long after they end. Sometimes, the only thing that keeps us from leaving is a glance that feels like home. Jesse Walker wasn't supposed to stop. He told himself that often, every time he passed a town with painted porches and soft yellow porch lights. Every time Lucy pointed to a field and said, "That looks like a good place, Daddy." There were no good places, not anymore. But that October afternoon the rain came fast. Sheets of it swept across the highway, chasing the rusted Ford pickup down a back road just outside a town too small to make maps. Jesse squinted through the cracked windshield, wipers clicking like a tired metronome. The fuel gauge leaned dangerously. Low? He turned off the road onto a gravel path, pulling up next to a weathered fence bordering a wheat field. Golden stalks bowed under the weight of the storm. That's when he saw it. A red tractor, motionless. Hood up. Steam hissing like a wounded animal. And beside it a woman, arms stretched wide over a little girl, shielding her with an old canvas jacket. The child was maybe 5, damp curls clinging to her forehead, her hand clutching a stuffed rabbit soaked to the ears. Jesse killed the engine. "Stay here," he said to Lucy. She didn't answer. She was watching the woman and child, her small hands cupped against the window. Jesse hesitated, reaching for the door handle, but stopped short. This wasn't his problem. He didn't do this anymore. People. They're broken things. They're broken lives. He'd learned painfully that when you tried to fix something that didn't belong to you, it never ended well. He was about to turn the key and drive off when Lucy said softly, "Daddy, she needs you." The words hit him like a wrench to the ribs. He opened the door. The rain hit hard and cold. Jesse walked across the muddy path, boots sinking with each step. Up close, the woman looked younger than he'd guessed. Late 20s, early 30s, soaked through, trembling. But her eyes were steady, blue-gray like storm clouds that refused to break. She didn't smile, just stepped aside. "I think something blew when I turned," she said, barely audible over the rain. "I tried calling someone, no service." Jesse crouched beside the engine, hands moving without asking permission. Old habits. The kind that buried themselves into your bones and stayed long after you'd sworn you'd let them go. "Battery's fine. Starter's shot," he said. "You got tools?" She pointed to a metal box in the tractor's side compartment. Jesse opened it, rifled through. Mismatched sockets, a wrench with a cracked handle, nothing labeled. He grunted, but made do. The child stood nearby, her eyes wide under the hood of her raincoat. Jesse glanced back at her. She clutched the rabbit tighter. "You scared of storms?" he asked gently. She nodded. He handed her a socket. "Can you hold this for me?" Her tiny hand reached out. Claire, he learned her name 10 minutes later, held the umbrella awkwardly over all 3 of them, kneeling on the wet soil. Her jeans were stained with mud. Jesse didn't ask where she was from or why she was alone with a little girl and a broken-down tractor in the middle of nowhere. He didn't want to know. But when the engine finally turned over, roaring like something coming back to life, Claire exhaled, too sharp to be relief. More like the release of something held too long in her chest. "Thank you," she said. "I can pay, or no need." She blinked. "At least let me." He was already walking away, shaking water from his jacket. "Get that girl inside. She's cold." Jesse didn't wait for a reply. Back in the truck, Lucy was hugging her knees, watching the rain slide down the windows. "You helped her," she said, as Jesse climbed in. He started the truck. "Wasn't a big deal." She looked scared. "She's got it handled." She smiled at you. Jesse didn't answer. He turned onto the road, the engine coughing against the wet gravel. A few miles ahead, he spotted an old church with a gravel lot and a rickety awning. He pulled in and parked for the night. The rain kept falling. Lucy curled up in the back, wrapped in a threadbare blanket. Jesse sat in the driver's seat, head against the window, listening to the storm. In his lap sat a wrench, the same cracked-handled socket he'd used. Claire must have left it in his hands when he stood up. He stared at it. Heavy, worn, still useful, much like himself. He thought about the way she'd looked at him, not with fear, not with flirtation, but something rawer. Like recognition. He didn't want to go back. He told himself he wouldn't, but the wrench sat there in his lap like an anchor. Jesse sighed, rolled it between his fingers. Maybe I'll drop it off tomorrow, he muttered, but part of him already knew. He wasn't going back to return a wrench. He was going back to something he hadn't dared name in years. The next morning, the rain had passed, leaving behind a pale silver mist and the scent of wet soil. Jesse stood outside the truck, wrench in hand, staring across the sleepy town that hadn't yet opened its eyes. Lucy was still asleep in the back seat, curled like a kitten, her breath fogging the window. Jesse didn't plan to stay. He told himself that again, like a line in a prayer he no longer believed. But he turned the truck around anyway. The road to Claire's farm was still muddy from the storm. The golden wheat fields glistened in the morning light. That red tractor sat near the barn now, quiet and smug as if proud of surviving the night. Jesse parked just off the gravel, stepping out quietly. He knocked on the front door once, twice. Then, the door opened a crack and Claire peered out, her hair tied back, dark circles under her eyes. She was holding a coffee mug, steam curling into the cold air. "I forgot to give this back," Jesse said, holding up the wrench. Claire blinked. She opened the door wider. "That's why you came all the way back? Guess I'm a fan of closure." There was a pause. "You want some coffee?" He hesitated. "My daughter's in the truck. She's still sleeping?" "She's welcome too." He followed her in, boots leaving faint tracks on the old wood floor. The house was small, aging, but clean. It smelled like strong coffee, soap, and faintly of cinnamon. There were toys in the corner of the room, mostly handmade or second-hand, and a stack of folded clothes on a worn couch. The walls were bare. No pictures, no paintings, no curtains on the windows. Claire caught his glance. "Curtains feel too closed in," she said simply, as if that explained everything. Maybe it did. Jesse sat at the kitchen table, fingers curling around a chipped ceramic mug. The coffee was dark and bitter, exactly the way he liked it. Claire didn't sit. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching him, not guarded, just measuring. "So," she said after a moment. "You from around here?" "No." "Passing through?" "Something like that." She nodded. Didn't press. "I'm guessing you're not local either," he said. "I was born here, left. Then life happened." She looked out the window. "Now I'm back." That was all she said. But Jesse knew the tone, knew the hollow behind those words. He didn't ask what had happened. Didn't mention the bruises he'd glimpsed on her wrist the night before. Some things didn't need retelling right away. Just acknowledging the silence around them was enough. A small shuffle came from down the hall. Emma peeked into the room, hair tousled, dragging her stuffed rabbit by one ear. She paused when she saw Jesse. He gave a small wave. She stared. Then Claire crouched and kissed the girl's head. "It's okay, baby. He's the one who helped us yesterday." Emma nodded, silent, and climbed into a chair beside Jesse. He slid the wrench across the table to her. "Think this belongs to you," he said. Emma took it like it was something special, fingers tracing the metal edge. "You're good with machines," Claire said quietly, pouring Emma a glass of milk. Used to be, Jesse replied. What happened? He looked out the window. The fields were soft gold under a pale sky. Life happened. He echoed her words. Claire didn't push. Just nodded again, then turned back to the stove. That small kitchen filled with quiet sounds. Emma sipping milk, the creak of the floorboards, Claire humming under her breath. Jesse hadn't realized how long it had been since he sat at a kitchen table that didn't belong to a gas station or a soup kitchen. He cleared his throat. I can help with the tractor if you need. I noticed it's running rough. Claire looked over her shoulder. I'd appreciate that. I can pay. No money. She frowned. Then why help? He looked at Emma, at the empty walls, at the house with no curtains, because someone needs to. Claire didn't smile, but she poured him another cup of coffee without asking. Outside, the sun finally broke through the clouds. Lucy came running across the field, boots splashing through, puddles hair tangled by the wind. Emma lit up the second she saw her and scrambled down from the chair. In that moment, something unspoken shifted in the room. Not trust. Not yet. But maybe a beginning. Jesse watched them play through the window, the laughter of two children echoing. Across the open yard, Claire leaned against the counter again, holding her mug like armor. Do you and Lucy have a place to stay tonight? She asked, not looking at him. No. You do now. Jesse didn't thank her. She didn't expect him to. But the silence that followed was warmer than most words. The second night came without a storm, but Jesse still lay awake. He wasn't used to roofs anymore, not the kind built with wood and care and the smell of memory. The small spare room Claire had offered him and Lucy was once a pantry, maybe. Bare, cool, but dry, and quiet. Unfamiliar quiet. Lucy, curled on a cot near the window, breathed steadily in sleep. The stuffed bear she'd carried since the fire was tucked beneath her chin. Jesse stared at the ceiling. He could still feel the tension in his shoulders, the twitch in his fingers, like waiting for something to fall apart. Because that's what always happened. Good things didn't last, not for people like him. The house creaked with the settling of night, the sound of old beams and honest walls. From down the hall, the soft knock of a kettle on a stove. Claire was still awake. He stayed in bed 5 minutes longer than he needed to, arguing with himself. Then got up, padded barefoot to the kitchen. The lights were low, golden and soft. Claire sat at the table, two mismatched mugs in front of her. Steam rose from both. Jesse paused in the doorway. I didn't know if you'd come, she said. Without turning around, he pulled out a chair and sat. I almost didn't. You seem to do that a lot. What? Almost. Jesse looked at the mug in front of him. It was navy blue, chipped along the rim. Her hand reached out to pull, her own closer. Her nails were clean, short, no rings. Silence settled between them again, not heavy, not uncomfortable, just full of the things neither of them were ready to say. Claire took a sip. Emma asked if Lucy was staying forever. What did you say? I said I didn't know. Jesse gave a slow nod. That's honest. Claire glanced over. Do you always keep your answers that short? Only when I don't trust myself to say more. That made her smile. Barely. But it was there. And it was the first real smile he'd seen from her. It knocked something loose in his chest. Claire looked down at her mug. Emma hasn't talked much since we left. Just with me, and only in pieces. Lucy was the same after the fire. Weeks of silence. Then questions Jesse couldn't answer. Then tears. Then quiet again. He remembered holding her in the middle of the night, her small body shaking like it would split apart. She'll talk, Jesse said. When she's ready. So, will Lucy? They know what we don't. What's that? He met her eyes. That it's okay to trust someone new. Claire didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. Outside, the wind stirred the fields. wheat whispering against itself in the dark. Claire stood and walked to the back door, opening it gently. Jessie followed, mug in hand. They stood together under the stars. The back porch overlooked the property, open fields, an old barn, and a garden half dug, marked with wooden stakes. Beside it, a small sapling stood alone, tied, upright with twine. "I planted it the day after I got the letter about the land," Claire said quietly. "Didn't even know if I'd stay, but I thought maybe something should." Jessie studied the tree. It couldn't have been taller than Lucy. Its leaves shivered in the night breeze. "What kind is it?" "Pear, I think. My dad used to grow them. He always said a farm isn't a home until there's something planted by hand." "That's a good rule." Claire sipped from her mug. "Emma calls it our maybe tree." He smiled faintly. "Why's that?" "She says maybe we'll stay, maybe it'll grow, maybe it'll be ours." Jessie looked at the small tree. He thought of Lucy and the way she'd curled into him after his wife's funeral. How he'd promised to keep them moving, stay safe, not get attached. And now here he was, on a porch that wasn't his, under stars that felt kinder than the ones before. "I think kids are smarter than we give them credit for," he said. "I think they're just braver." They stood like that for a while. No words, just night air, soft silence, and the smell of rain still lingering in the soil. Eventually, Claire turned back toward the door. "You don't have to fix everything, you know," she said, pausing before going in. Jessie looked down at the mug in his hand. Warm, steady. "I don't know how not to," he said. When she was gone, he stayed outside, eyes drifting to the tree. Maybe it would take root. Maybe he already had. The nightmares didn't come often anymore. But when they did, Jessie woke soaked in sweat, heart jackhammering in the dark, the scent of smoke still curling somewhere in his memory. Tonight, it wasn't the fire that pulled him from sleep. It was the scream, not loud, but sharp, guttural, a child's. He sat up in an instant. Lucy stirred beside him on the cot. "Daddy?" "I'm okay," he whispered. "Go back to sleep." But Jessie was already out the door, down the hallway barefoot, following the sound. He stopped at Claire's room. The door was cracked open. Inside, Claire sat up on the bed, hair tangled, face pale in the moonlight. Emma was in her arms, crying against her shoulder, her tiny hands fisted in her mother's shirt. Claire rocked her slowly, whispering words. That didn't sound like words, just a rhythm. A prayer. A promise. Jessie lingered in the doorway. Claire didn't flinch when she saw him. Just met his eyes over her daughter's head. There was something raw there. Not shame, not fear, just exhaustion. The kind that went deeper than the body. The kind that came from carrying too much, too long. He didn't speak. Didn't ask if she needed help. He just stood there, steady, unmoving, until Emma's sobs faded and her breathing slowed. Then Claire mouthed a silent thank you and pulled the blanket tighter around the child. Jessie stepped back, closed the door without a sound, and went to the kitchen. The mug from the night before was still on the table. He filled it with water and sat down, rubbing his hands together. They still smelled faintly of motor oil. It was strange. The way the past clung to skin, to silence, more than to words. A few minutes later, the soft creak of floorboards. Claire, she didn't say anything as she walked to the table, hair now braided, eyes glassy. She poured herself a glass too, then sat across from him. They sat there in silence. The clock ticked on the wall, the kind that probably hadn't worked in years but was still there, like habit, like memory. Jessie finally spoke. "Does she dream a lot?" Claire nodded. "Not always nightmares. Sometimes she talks to people she misses. Her dad?" She looked down at the glass. "He's not dead, but he's not someone to miss." Jessie waited. Claire traced the rim of her glass with one finger. When Emma was 3, he started drinking heavier, started yelling, then pushing. Then she stopped, exhaled. One night he hit her. Just a slap, but it was enough. I packed 2 bags and left before dawn. Jesse didn't ask why she didn't call the police, or why she waited so long. He knew. You don't leave until something inside you breaks. Not once, but completely. And even then you carry the pieces for years. She's strong, Jesse said. So's Lucy. He nodded slowly. She was 5 when we lost her mom. Fire in our apartment complex. She hasn't talked about it since. Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. How do you carry that? I don't. He looked at the cup in his hands. Some days it carries me. Some days it drops me. Claire's eyes met his. No pity. Just understanding. That's what made it bearable. Do you ever feel angry? She asked. All the time. I thought I was broken because I still hate him. You're not broken. Jesse's voice was steady now. You're still here. Claire blinked hard, turned away and stood. She walked to the window, arms folded. Outside, the fields were ghost-like in the moonlight. The small tree Emma called the maybe tree stood alone, its leaves barely moving. He used to say I was lucky he stayed, she said, that no one else would. And for a while I believed him. Jesse stood, walked to her side. He lied. Claire let out a breath, shaky and slow. They stood there. 2 silhouettes in a kitchen washed with soft light and the weight of old battles. He can't find us, she whispered, more to herself than him. No, Jesse said. And if he does, he won't get past me. Claire turned to look at him. There was nothing romantic in his tone, no bravado, just truth. And something about that, the simplicity of it, undid a knot in her chest she hadn't realized was still there. They stood for another moment. Then Claire nodded, stepped back, and turned toward the hallway. Before she disappeared, she said quietly, "Thank you for standing there, at the door, just being there." Jesse looked down at his hands. I didn't know what else to do. Sometimes, that's enough. And then she was gone. Back to her daughter. Back to her ghosts. Jesse stayed in the kitchen a while longer, watching the maybe tree through the window. He didn't know if it would grow. But tonight, for the first time in years, he hoped it would. The morning sun slid through the kitchen window like warm honey, catching on the floating dust in the air and turning the battered countertop into something quietly beautiful. Claire stood barefoot, hair pulled into a loose knot, flipping pancakes on the old stovetop. The scent of cinnamon and browned butter filled the house. Jesse sat at the table, sharpening the blade of a pocket knife. Lucy and Emma were curled up on the couch, giggling at a picture book between them, their socked feet tangled like siblings who hadn't yet realized they weren't. It was Sunday, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like something mattered. Claire poured coffee without asking. Jesse looked up from the blade and offered a quiet, "Thanks." She just nodded, sliding a stack of pancakes onto a plate and setting it in front of him. "Real maple syrup," she said. "The last of it." Jesse raised an eyebrow. "You giving me the good stuff?" Claire shrugged. "You fixed the barn. Tore yesterday without being asked. Seems fair." He smirked, cutting into the stack. "I like your version of economics." Claire smiled, for real this time, and took her seat across from him. The silence was different now. Not tense. Not empty. Just full. After breakfast, the girls ran outside into the soft breeze, their laughter echoing across the open yard. Claire watched them through the screen door, mug cradled between her hands. She didn't laugh like that for a long time, she said softly. Jesse didn't answer. He didn't need to. He understood. Sometimes the most profound grief makes the smallest joys feel like miracles. They spent the rest of the morning working side by side. Claire dug up weeds in the garden plot, while Jesse replaced a rotten board on the porch. They didn't speak much, but when they passed each other, handing tools, wiping sweat, pausing to drink water, there was something grounding about it. like a rhythm neither of them had realized they'd been missing. At one point, Claire dusted off an old radio from the pantry. She turned the dial until it caught an old folk station, tinny but warm. Patsy Cline hummed through the static and Claire started humming along. "You know this one?" she asked. Jessie didn't look up from the saw. "Only every word." She raised an eyebrow. "You don't seem like a Patsy Cline kind of guy." He smirked. "Wife used to play her on Sunday mornings, loud enough to scare the birds." Claire's humming stopped, but she didn't look away. "She sounds like someone I would have liked." "You would have." Jessie paused, gaze drifting to the tree line. She believed in planting things, flowers, people, hope. Claire's voice softened. "So do you. Even if you won't admit it." Jessie didn't answer. But later, when he caught Lucy planting marigold seeds beside the porch with Emma, he didn't stop them. He just knelt beside them, showed them how deep to press, each one, and smiled when they got more dirt on their faces than in the soil. That afternoon, Claire opened a box she'd kept under the stairs. Inside were a few of her father's old things: faded photographs, seed catalogs, and a rolled-up sketch. She spread it on the table. It was a hand-drawn image of the property, dated 20 years earlier. There were notes in the margins. Future, orchard, smokehouse, fire pit for winter nights. At the center was a small square marked home. "My dad drew this before Mom left," she said. "He had all these dreams. Most never happened, but he kept planning, even when it was just him and an empty house." Jessie studied the sketch. His fingers brushed the spot labeled home. "What made you keep it?" Claire shrugged. "I guess I wanted to remember what it could have been." He looked at her. "Maybe it still can be." Claire looked out the window. The girls were now swinging from an old tire Jessie had fixed the day before. Sunlight caught their hair like gold thread. The maybe tree swayed gently in the wind beside them, still small, still uncertain, but standing. That night, dinner was simple: baked potatoes, beans, cornbread with butter. But it felt like a feast. The four of them sat around the kitchen table, a table Jessie had reinforced earlier that week with new brackets and nails. It wobbled a little less now. Emma said grace, shyly, with her hands in Lucy's. Jessie bowed, his head. Claire didn't close her eyes. She watched them all quietly, as if memorizing the moment. After the dishes were done, Jessie stepped outside. The stars were out. The sky stretched so wide, it made him feel both smaller and more alive than he'd felt in years. Claire joined him on the porch. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For today." He nodded. "Wasn't anything special?" "It was," she said. "You just don't know it yet." Jessie looked at the maybe tree silhouetted in moonlight. The girls had tied a string around it with little paper hearts hanging from the branches. Each one had a single word scribbled in crayon: hope, safe, stay, home. He swallowed. Claire stood beside him, close but not touching. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "Do you ever think some people are just meant to pass through?" Jessie stared out into the field. "I used to think I was," he said. "But today, I didn't want to leave." Claire looked at him. "Me neither. They didn't say goodnight. Didn't need to. Some days don't end. They just settle, soft and slow, into the places that feel most like home." The knock came just after noon. 3 sharp raps on the door. Not hesitant, not polite. Jessie was in the barn, tuning the old tractor's engine, when he heard it. Something in the sound made him drop the wrench before he knew why. When he reached the porch, Claire was already standing in the open doorway. The man on the other side smiled like someone who'd been watching the house for longer than I should have. "Well, hell," the man said. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here, Claire." He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed like someone trying to look casual. Flannel shirt, jeans, clean boots. But there was calculation behind his eyes. His hair was too neat, his smile too practiced. Claire's arms stiffened at her sides. Her face lost all color. "Emma's inside," she said, her voice low. "Don't raise your voice." The man chuckled. "What? No hug for your husband?" Jessie stepped up behind her, silent. The man's eyes flicked toward him. "And you must be the new handyman." Jessie didn't smile. "Can I help you with something?" "Not unless you're a divorce lawyer." The man shoved his hands in his pockets. "Just came to see what my wife's been doing with my land." Jessie's jaw tightened. Claire hadn't said they were still married, only that she'd left. That changed things. Not emotionally, not in what was right or wrong, but legally. Claire took a step forward. "You have no claim here. The deed is in my name. You know that. Don't get legal on me, sweetheart." The man's voice cooled. "I'm not here to take anything. Yet. I'm just here to say hi to my daughter. She doesn't want to see you." He raised his chin. "She's 5. She doesn't get a vote." Jessie stepped in front of Claire slowly. "You need to go," he said. The man's eyes narrowed. "You think you can tell me what to do on my own porch? It's not yours. Not anymore." The tension in the air turned cold. The man leaned forward just slightly, enough for Jessie to see the twitch in his jaw. There it was. The same look he'd seen in men who drank too hard and hit too fast. Jessie knew how this played out. The storm wasn't now, but it was coming. "I'll be back," the man said, voice low. "With papers. You're not keeping my kid from me." Then he turned, walked back to the truck and drove off in a cloud of dust. Jessie closed the door as gently as he could. Claire sank into a chair, hands trembling in her lap. Her breathing was shallow, lips pressed into a line. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Jessie crouched in front of her. "For what?" "I didn't tell you everything. I didn't think he'd find us. You didn't owe me anything. You still don't. I brought this here. I brought danger." He shook his head. "You brought hope. Don't confuse the two." Claire looked up at him. Her eyes were glassy, rimmed in fear, but underneath it, rage. The good kind, the kind that burns clean. "He doesn't get to scare her again," she said. "No, he doesn't." They stayed like that for a long moment. Then Jessie stood, went outside, and spent the next hour reinforcing the front gate and checking the locks. He wasn't expecting a fight, but he'd learned long ago. Hoping for the best only worked if you prepared for the worst. That night, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Lucy and Emma lay together on a pile of blankets in the living room, whispering between themselves, unaware of the thundercloud now hanging above the adults. Claire cooked dinner without speaking. Jessie offered to clean up, and she let him. When they stepped onto the porch later, the stars were hidden behind a heavy sky. Claire stood with her arms folded tight across her chest. "Do you think he'll come back tonight?" "No," Jessie said. "He's the type who wants you to fear him first." "Then wait." Claire nodded. "I hate that I still flinch. He built that into you. It's not your fault." She was quiet a long time. Then, "I used to think I deserved it. The yelling, the way he twisted things, the way he made me feel small. You didn't. I know that now. But back then, I thought love meant surviving." Jessie looked out over the fields. The maybe tree stood still in the dark. "I thought love meant protecting," he said. "I thought if I did everything right, I could keep my family safe, but fire doesn't care how good a man you are." Claire turned toward him. "You couldn't have saved her." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. She stepped closer, gently, touched his forearm. It was the first time she had touched him. Not to thank him, not out of necessity, just to let him know she was still there. "We can't undo what's behind us," she said softly, "but we can choose what we stand for now." Jessie nodded. "Then I stand here," he said. "With you." And he meant it, even if it meant drawing a line. even if it meant facing a man who'd made it his mission to break what Jessie was just learning to rebuild. Inside the house, Lucy giggled at something Emma whispered. That laughter was everything, and Jessie knew, no matter what came next, he'd protect it. The sky cracked open just after midnight. Rain came hard, sideways, a wind-whipped fury that slammed against the windows like fists. Thunder rolled low and slow, rattling the cupboards, the bones of the old house, and something deep in Jessie's chest. He sat by the front door, fully dressed, boots laced, a flashlight in one hand, a crowbar in the other, waiting. The storm was loud, but not loud enough to drown out instinct. Jessie had seen the signs. The way Claire's ex spoke, the way he left. Too calm, too clean, like he'd already planned the next move. It wasn't if he'd come back, it was when. The girls were asleep in the back room, curled under thick quilts. Claire was in the kitchen, pacing in slow circles, holding a kitchen knife she hadn't put down since sunset. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They were long past needing words. Then came the sound Jessie had been waiting for. The crunch of gravel under tires, swallowed quickly by the rain. He stood. Claire's breath caught. She moved to the hallway, just far enough to be close if the girls woke. Headlights cut across the yard, then died. The silence that followed was louder than the thunder. Jessie stepped onto the porch, rain slamming into him sideways, cold and wild. He could barely see through the darkness, but he didn't need to. He knew that shape stepping out of the truck, Claire's ex-husband. The man didn't yell this time. He didn't swagger. He just walked straight through the mud, toward the front. Steps, jacket zipped, hands empty, but not harmless. "You've got something of mine," the man said. Jessie didn't move. "You need to leave. She's my daughter. She's not afraid of you for no reason. She's my blood. Then act like it." The man stepped closer. "You don't want this fight." Jessie raised the crowbar slightly, not as a threat but as a promise. "You've already lost," he said. "You just haven't accepted it yet." Lightning split the sky. In that flash of white, Jessie saw it, the sudden twist in the man's posture, a surge forward, a lunge. Jessie didn't hesitate. He swung once, not to hurt but to stop. The bar caught the man across the forearm. He stumbled, slipped in the mud, hit the ground hard. Jessie stepped between him and the porch steps, heart hammering, breath shallow. "Get off this land." The man looked up, eyes filled not with rage, but disbelief, like no one had ever said no to him and meant it. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "I've already regretted too much," Jessie said. "This won't be one of them." Behind him, Claire appeared in the doorway, her hair soaked, the knife still in her hand. She didn't speak, but her presence said everything. The man stood slowly, rain pouring down his face, and walked back to the truck. No threats, no fight left in him, just defeat. The truck engine revved, tires spun, then the taillights vanished into the storm. Jessie stood on the porch a moment longer, breathing hard, muscles tight. Claire touched his arm. He turned toward her, still soaked, still trembling, and she stepped closer. Without a word, she wrapped her arms around him, her face against his chest. The knife dropped to the porch floor with a soft clatter. He held her like he was holding on to something more than a person, like he was anchoring himself in the moment, in the choice to stay, to fight, to belong. The storm raged around them, but something inside him finally settled. Claire whispered against his chest, "You didn't have to do that." "I did," he murmured. "I wanted to." And then, after a pause, "I thought I couldn't love again, thought it died with her. But tonight," when he stepped forward, "all I knew was I couldn't let him take what I'd found." Claire looked up at him. Rain streaked her cheeks, but her eyes were fierce and clear. "We're not running anymore," she said. Jessie nodded. "No, we're not." Behind them, Lucy and Emma stood in the hallway, small and quiet, watching. Jessie opened his arms. Lucy ran to him first, Emma close behind. He knelt, pulling them both in, Claire wrapping around all three. A pile of trembling limbs and unspoken vows. "If I have to pay for this," Jessie whispered, "I will. But if I had to do it again, I'd still choose you." Claire's hand found his. Fingers laced. The storm howled one last time, then began to drift, and somewhere in the field behind them, the maybe tree stood through it all, bending, but never breaking. The smell hit first. Jessie was the one who woke to it. Acrid and wrong, like burnt wire and old oil, not the earthy smoke of a chimney or a campfire, but sharp and sour, something alive turning to ruin. Then came the crackle, faint, hungry. He was out of bed before he'd fully registered what it was. "Fire!" he shouted, already moving. "Claire!" The hallway was dark, but the air shimmered with heat. Smoke crawled along the ceiling, thick as fog. Jessie grabbed Lucy from the cot, her arms clinging to his neck before her eyes even opened. Claire emerged from the other room, Emma in her arms. "Barefoot, hair wild, this way," Jessie barked, pushing toward the kitchen. The front door was already hot to the touch. He changed direction, kicked open the back door with his boot. They stumbled out into the wet grass behind the house, coughing, blinking against the sting in their eyes. Claire collapsed to her knees, still clutching Emma as Jessie ran back, shirt over his mouth, grabbing the fire extinguisher by the porch, useless against a blaze this big. It wasn't the entire house. Not yet, but the left side, the wall near the girls' room, was glowing from within, fire licking through the cracked wood like a living thing. Claire's voice broke behind him. "No, no, no, no." Jessie turned, breathing hard, heart pounding. Lucy stood beside Claire now, barefoot in the wet grass, eyes wide with disbelief. Jessie looked once more at the fire, then dropped the extinguisher. Hopeless. They couldn't save it. Not this time. By dawn, half the house was gone. Black skeleton walls curled upward into the early gray sky. Rain had come in light drizzles, too late to help. Jessie sat on the back steps, the only part still intact, shirt soaked, arms covered in ash. His knuckles were bloodied. Not from fighting, from trying. Claire stood beside the maybe tree. Emma held tight against her side. The tree was scorched on one side, the leaves singed, but it hadn't burned through. It was still standing. So were. A deputy from the sheriff's office had come at first light, took photos, asked quiet questions, promised to investigate. There was no proof, of course. No tire tracks, no fingerprints. Just a hunch that the past had come back once more. Not with fists, but with flame. When the officer left, silence fell again. Claire approached slowly, her voice hoarse. "I thought we were done running." Jessie didn't look up. "We are. He did this. Probably." She sat down beside him, close, but not touching. "I should have seen it coming," she said. "I did, and I stayed anyway." Claire glanced over. "And now look." "I am looking," Jessie said, "and I still see a family." That silenced her. She watched the girls playing in the grass, their dresses damp, hair tangled, laughter somehow still rising above the smoke. Children, Jessie thought, had the strange ability to keep moving forward, even when everything behind them had collapsed. Claire's voice cracked. "I'm so tired, Jessie." He finally looked at her, and he said the only thing that mattered. "Then let me carry some of it." Her eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. Not until he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, gently pulled her into him. Then she let it happen. All of it. Not sobs, not keening grief. Just quiet tears sliding down ash-streaked cheeks. Relief, sorrow, rage, release. All of it. "I built that house," she whispered. "I know. It was supposed to be where we started over." He pressed his forehead to hers. "It still is." Later that day, the townspeople came, one by one, like rain after drought. First the sheriff, with extra blankets and a heavy silence that said "I'm sorry" without words. Then the woman from the bakery, arms full of bread and jam and canned soup. "I never liked that man," she muttered. "Not since high school." Then the old carpenter, Mr. Powell, with his weathered hands and a quiet offer. "I got some lumber. Ain't much, but it's a start." They kept coming. With plywood. With nails. With hope. By sunset, a tent had been set up for the girls. A new cot laid out. Claire stood at the edge of it all, hand pressed to her chest, eyes flicking from face to face. "They don't even know us," she said. "They don't have to," Jesse replied. "They just see someone standing in the ashes and decide to stay." Claire looked over at him, and for the first time since the fire she smiled. Small. "Real, I think," she said softly. "This might be the place." Jesse tilted his head. "Place for what?" She didn't answer, but her hand found his, laced, their fingers and squeezed. And for now that was enough. The next morning, Jesse woke to the sound of hammers. Not nightmares, not fire, just nails being driven into wood. He blinked, sat up on the cot beneath the canvas tarp someone had stretched, between the barn and the porch frame. The sky was pale, streaked with the soft pinks and oranges of a new day. Lucy was still asleep beside him, curled beneath a quilt someone must have dropped off in the night. Then he heard it again. Thwack, thwack, thwack. He stood slowly, muscles aching in the way they do after surviving something big. And when he stepped into the yard, he stopped. Half a dozen trucks were parked in the drive. People were already moving, unloading plywood, unrolling insulation, laying out plans on the hood of an old Dodge. Mr. Powell, the carpenter, was sketching on a clipboard, chewing the end of a pencil. The sheriff stood beside him, pointing toward the new foundation stakes. Claire stood nearby, hair tied back, flannel shirt too big on her frame, her hand on Emma's shoulder. She looked up, met Jesse's eyes. He walked to her, boots crunching. "In the damp grass, you started without me," he said. She smiled. "You needed sleep," they insisted. Jesse turned to watch them. Neighbors, strangers, friends of her father maybe. All working like this was just what you did. And maybe it was. Maybe in places like this, when something burns down, everyone shows up with whatever they've got and starts building again. He felt a hand clap his back. Mr. Powell handed him a hammer. "You can't just stand around looking pretty, son." Jesse took it with a small laugh. Wasn't aware that was ever a risk. The day unfolded in sweat and sawdust. Jesse helped raise the frame for a new kitchen wall. Claire in the bakery. Woman painted boards white in the shade while the girls ran barefoot, ferrying water cups like miniature waitresses. A retired farmer brought over a porch swing. The sheriff handed Jesse a six-pack at noon and said, "You're one of us now, like it or not." And Jesse realized he did like it, more than he knew. That afternoon, Lucy found him near the barn, wiping his brow with the edge of his sleeve. "Daddy," she said, tugging his hand. "Yeah, baby? Can we stay here for real?" He crouched, in front of her. "What do you think?" She thought about it, scrunched her nose the way she always did when she took something seriously. "I think it feels like we already do." Jesse swallowed, pulled her into a hug. "Me too," he whispered. Later, as the sun dropped low and golden across the yard, Claire came to find him. She held something in her hands, a small wooden sign, freshly painted, the brush strokes still drying. He tilted his head. "What's that?" "A name," she said. She held it up. The maybe tree. Jesse stared at it. It was hand-painted, imperfect, but it was beautiful. Claire nodded toward the tree, still standing, still singed, but with new buds starting to push through. They said it. "Might not make it," she said, "but it's trying anyway." She looked at him. "So are we." They hung the sign together. Lucy and Emma clapped when they saw it. The bakery woman sniffled and muttered something about sawdust in her eyes. When night came, the crew left with promises to return at sunrise. The four of them sat on the porch. Steps What was now a porch again, if not yet finished, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars poke through the deepening sky. Claire leaned her head on Jesse's shoulder. He didn't move. Didn't want to. "Do you believe in second chances?" she asked. He looked at the maybe tree, swaying gently in the breeze. "I believe in earned ones," he said. She was quiet a long moment. Then, "You earned yours." He turned, pressed his lips gently to her forehead. Not passion, not urgency, just presence. The girls had fallen asleep behind them, curled together like two pieces of a puzzle. Jesse listened to the sounds of night, crickets, the soft creak of the porch, the far-off bark of a dog, and let it settle into him. This wasn't where he thought he'd end up, but maybe it was exactly where he needed to be. A town that knew his scars, a woman who knew his silence, a child that still reached for his hand. Without hesitation, he breathed in deep, let it out slow. "I thought I'd spend the rest of my life driving," he said. Claire smiled without opening her eyes. "You stopped, and somehow that said it all." The wind was gentler now, not sharp like before, not a warning, just a breeze, soft, steady, brushing through the tall wheat that stretched out behind the house like a sea of gold. Jesse stood at the edge of the new porch, mug in hand, watching the sunrise bleed into the fields. Claire's boots were on the step beside his, still damp with morning dew. Inside, he could hear the quiet clink of dishes, the soft chatter of children beginning their day. The house was nearly finished. It had a real roof again, a front door. That didn't stick. Windows with new frames built by Mr. Powell's gnarled hands and Jesse's steadier ones. There was still work to do, paint to touch up, shutters to hang, but it stood, proud and imperfect. Like all good things, and it belonged to them now. Not legally, not just yet, but in all the ways that mattered. Claire stepped out, her sweater loose over one shoulder, coffee in her hand, hair braided to the side. "Lucy made eggs," she said. "Half of one ended up on the floor, the rest's edible." Jesse chuckled. "Progress." Claire leaned on the porch railing, shoulder touching his. They didn't say anything for a while. Then she nodded toward the tree. "You saw it?" Jesse turned and smiled. The maybe tree had bloomed. Tiny white blossoms dotted its branches like a quiet kind of applause. The buds had pushed through the charred bark, stubborn and soft. Life insisting. "She's gonna make it," Jesse murmured. Claire nodded. "They said it might not survive the winter." He glanced at her. "Neither did we." They stayed there as the sky warmed. Later that morning, Lucy and Emma ran through the field barefoot, their dresses catching the wind. They'd built a fort. Behind the barn, just a sheet, some twine, and an old quilt. Jesse helped them hang a sign over the entrance. Club Treehouse. Membership, 2. Adults allowed only by invitation. Claire had baked a pie for no reason. Jesse repaired the back gate, singing an old country tune under his breath that Claire pretended not to know, until she joined in for the chorus. Around noon, a neighbor stopped by with a basket of peaches. Another brought honey. By late afternoon, someone left a sack of nails and a box of curtain rods on the porch with a note, "For windows that deserve a little grace." Claire cried when she read it. Not loudly. Just a hand over her mouth. Jesse didn't say anything, just wrapped an arm around her shoulders and let her lean. That evening, the table was set for 4. Not a picnic table, not a temporary bench, but the old wooden table Jesse had repaired with his own hands, the one Claire had insisted they save from the ashes. Sanded, sealed, and steady now, with 4 chairs and a vase of wildflowers in the center. Emma said grace again. This time, no one prompted her. After dinner, as dusk slid across the fields, Jesse sat on the porch steps, Lucy's head in his lap. She'd fallen asleep mid-story. Emma was curled beside her, still holding the stuffed rabbit that had somehow survived it all. Claire sat close, knees drawn up, arms around them all. Jessie looked out at the yard, the swing swaying empty, the garden rose planted, the barn door fixed, but most of all he looked at the tree. It wasn't a maybe tree anymore, it had become something else, a promise tree. No ceremony, no nameplate, just a knowing, something that had burned but chosen to grow anyway. Claire's voice broke the stillness. You don't talk much about the fire, the one from before. He ran a hand through Lucy's hair. No, you don't have to. He nodded. I know. But when you're ready. He looked at her. I'll tell you this much, he said. That night when I lost everything, I remember thinking I'd never build anything again, that it would hurt too much. Claire waited. And I was right, he said. It did hurt. He looked down at the girls, at her, at the sky fading from gold to indigo, but it was worth it. Claire exhaled. I'm glad you stayed. I didn't, he said. She raised an eyebrow. I chose to stay, and that made all the difference. They sat like that until the crickets took over the world, until the stars blinked on like gentle promises, until the wind no longer asked if they would run, but instead asked, what will you plant next? As Jessie stood to carry Lucy to bed, Claire reached out, fingers brushing his wrist. He looked down. She didn't say it, she didn't have to, but he answered anyway. I'm not going anywhere, he said, and meant it. If this story touched something quiet in you, a memory, a longing, or simply the hope that it's never too late to begin again, then let it stay with you a little longer. Click like, subscribe to the channel, and come back for more stories that don't shout, but whisper their way into your heart. Because sometimes the softest endings are the ones we carry with us the longest.